So, of course, the big news yesterday was the West Coast Eagles board have thrown their unanimous support behind Adam Simpson. Now, I think they've wavered throughout this season, Barra. I'm sticking to my guns with my earlier reports. I think it was a board that was divided this year. Clearly, yesterday they've stuck with Adam Simpson for 2 more years. I think it was as much a financial decision as it was a stick with the coach decision. You know, up to $6 million payout, including a soft cap tax. It's probably the right decision. I think, given where they're at, you throw a new coach in there, it's lambs to the slaughter because it could get worse next year. And I think the future of the CEO, Trevor Nisbet, will be very much up in the air. He's indicated that next year's his last, but I wouldn't be surprised if it's sooner than that, and he has also flagged that. There'll be changes to the coaching department, and I think there needs to be a really strong voice in there to challenge Adam Simpson from time to time on various issues. So I think there's a fair bit to go still, but that is a big decision yesterday. Yeah,
and I'm a little bit different in that I thought they'd always hang together and he'd stay. And I was surprised at where some of the angst was coming from. I was surprised at who was driving it. Like, who was talking to Eddie? Who was talking to Carolyn Wilson? Because Eddie actually said that he predicted that he'd go that week, didn't he? I mean, Eddie actually went on record and said, unless there's a massive backflip, Adam Simpson will be gone. So who was feeding him that? And why were they feeding him that, Quarters?
That's a very good question,
Barra. And so who needed to survive? That's what the next question. So,
it is.
Yeah. So who do you deflect onto if you're trying to survive? So, yeah. So I reckon, Quarters, there was a time. I reckon straight after the Derby.
Well, his language shifted immeasurably after the Derby. He was starting to talk about what will be, will be. All of those sorts of phrases were being rolled out. So I think the language shifted. I think he was on notice the last few weeks. We saw some massive support from fan base, and we saw some support from the players as well. Yep. So
Tim Kelly was crucial, I believe. Obviously, Cripps came out. So did even one of the young blokes at Jinby came out. So McGovern. Duggan. A lot of that was important, but I think the only time he was a little bit shaky was straight after the Derby. If the board had met straight after the Derby, he might have been okay. Maybe we need to do something here. What the hell's going on? But what's fascinating is when Simo twigged that something was up, because he thought he was sweet-ski all the way through. He's got a 2-year deal.
Clarity.
And when he asked for clarity and the first trigger of that was when somebody suggested he takes leave.
That was during the year.
Yeah, remember that balls up? That was the first time when Simo go, well, hang on, something's happening here. What's going on? Why are they trying to send me on leave? And then he said, no, I don't want to go on leave, and I haven't been offered leave.
That was extended break at the end of the season, by the way. That's what that was
But
about.
Remember the confusion around what actually happened? And so I think that was the first time Simo go, hang on, whoa, hang on.
I agree with that.
There's a signal here. Something's going on behind the scenes. I've got to get on top of this. I'm going to ask for clarity. And then finally, he actually put his feet down and said, or stomp. He said wasn't stomping his feet, but he basically said, I need clarity as to where we're heading. And the board in the end said, yeah, no, we're staying the course. I mean, I think it's probably the right thing to do. I think you're right. There needs to be some changes.
There has to be some change. And I think it starts with the CEO. I really believe that. Has done a great job, has been there a long time, but you can be there too long.
And in a coaching sense as well. I mean,
I think 10 years is too long as well. But
because what happened? You know what's happened. To be perfectly honest, the players more or less not took over the club. It was a bit like when Woosha was at Essendon. The players tended to run the club, and they'd go straight to the CEO and talk to him and this sort of stuff. That sort of thing was happening at West Coast, like the Josh Kennedys of the world. Luke Shuey, and they basically had a lot of say in it. It started when they went to Queensland and to the hub, and they didn't want to be there, remember? And they'd handled that very badly, and it pervaded the whole joint, didn't it? The whole club, all the team, all the players, all sort of, this is horrible, we're getting treated badly, we shouldn't be here, why are we being treated like this? They didn't handle it well at all. And that was the first real player power sort of overcoming of the club. And then Simo loves them because they're all these premiership stars. So he sort of let them get away with more than they probably needed to. And they also took the family club thing to the nth degree. Like it wasn't so much a footy club as a family environment. And I'm not saying it's a bad thing. I'm just saying that it was all part of that. Okay, the players run the joint.
I think a way to summarise that and what you're saying is that I think there've been some comfort zones there.
Yeah,
and it was a great column by
exactly.
Craig O'Donoghue the other day too on saying comfort zones are closed now, and I think he's right.
That's
And
what they got to do because
that happens.
Yeah.
And in many ways, you'll take a premiership any day of the week. You'll take one. They're hard to win, but in many ways, 2018 sort of hurt him a bit.
In
Coming
some
out
ways,
of that.
yeah.
Well, you got long-term deals for some of your players, and I think.
And you've got to, I mean, you got to take the premiership every day of the week. But they got soft. I think it's a bit like the old Roman Empire. They got soft, didn't they? You know what I mean?
Yes.
They needed to come again.
And also, Barra, all the great dynasties end one way, and it's called hubris, my friend.
Actually, you know what I really loved? Where is that thing? Your editor wrote a great editorial piece, and he quoted a poem. Here it is. Percy Shelley's poignant tale of power in the poem of Ozymandias.
Yes, I did read it.
Did you read that? And
I
it was, and remember that show Breaking Bad?
Yes.
Breaking Bad. Did you ever watch Breaking Bad?
I wasn't really into it, but yeah, I know.
I used to love it. They sort of took this on as well. That was an episode in there. Look on my work, ye mighty, and despair. And it's a plaque on a statue of a once great leader. Then that's what it says in the poem. There's this sort of dilapidated statue with sand and sort of collapsing, and at the bottom it said, "Look on my work, ye mighty, and despair." But basically saying, eventually things don't work out, and you have to change it up. One thing I didn't understand in this whole process, and this is where the investigation needs to go: who re-signed Simo for those extra time? And I know he was going to take, a pay cut around COVID and all that sort of stuff, but why was there no triggers in the contracts? Like, mate, if you finish last, or if you only win 2 games, you can
Good point.
Null and void. How did that not actually go into the contract?
That's a good
All
point.
the bonuses and everything. So he must have been in a strong negotiating position because there was none of those checks and balances that you need.
And I will say that he is contracted for 2 years, but if they have it, and it could get worse next year. Now, it may not, but they are losing a hell of a lot of experience.
I'm thinking 6 to 7, 8 wins, something like that.
If they do that, that's definitely a step forward. But if it gets worse, if they cop another 500-point losses, then I think 3 million is a lot better than 6 million as a payout.
Absolutely.